Hey everyone, I hope this video finds you well. I have a pretty cool video for a lot of you out there. Recently I had the opportunity to interview Mr. Chris Kaleki, who was a PvP developer for World of Warcraft. He was a developer for WoW for the past 13 years, and I got to ask him all of the questions that we or us players have. Questions that I have about PvP gearing, class balance, feedback, rated battlegrounds, how to improve them, rated solo queue. All of that good stuff we discussed in this video, and there will be timestamps listed below so you can skip around depending on the part that you're interested in. But I recommend you listen to the whole thing, as I think it is a good listen and pretty eye-opening and may answer some of the questions that you do have. And if you guys liked it, let me know. Maybe we can do it again. So hope you all enjoy. We do have a sponsor for this video, so let's hop into that, and then I'll see you all in the interview. Thanks. Thank you Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Surfshark VPN is a virtual private network designed as an easy-to-use app and browser extension that allows you to access content anywhere as if you were in another country. And I know what many of you are thinking. Why does this matter? Well, let me explain. Oftentimes I have viewers that say some of my videos are blocked in their country, or they cannot access certain websites because of nationwide restrictions. This bypasses all of that. Additionally, you can access content that is only available in specific regions. Because I'm located in the US, I was able to watch the Last Dance Michael Jordan documentary a few months back on Netflix before almost everyone else who didn't have cable, as other countries had it before we did. In fact, depending on where you're at in the world, you may be missing out on over 50% of the Netflix library because of certain restrictions. You can get more out of your applications with Surfshark VPN. And more importantly, you can ensure your internet security using a virtual private network. Your IP address is attached to almost everything you do on the internet, and I've had viewers send me gifts to my address without me even knowing. And while I appreciate the gifts, that was a little scary because I never gave out my address. Since then, having a VPN is a must for me and my work, especially during times like these. They are also the only VPN service to offer support on an unlimited number of devices, and right now you can use code Stoopzz to get 83% off plus 3 extra months for free. So check out the link in the description for more information, and thank you Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. All right guys, I'm joined here by Chris Kaleki.
You got it.
Okay, because for the longest time I've been calling you Chris Kaleki for the longest time, and then I watched
totally fine.
I watched your video, and then I heard you like, oh, I've been saying it wrong this whole time. So why don't you introduce yourself, and then I'll tell a story of actually how I kind of met you.
Sure, yeah. Kaleki, it's kind of a weird name. It's actually a native Hawaiian name. My dad's native Hawaiian.
Oh, okay.
And the Kalekis are like, at least my family tells me, they're just like a family of hula dancers that entertained King Kamehameha back in I don't know, century ago or whatever. So that's funny. But yeah, anyways, yeah, my name is Chris Kaleki. I was a game designer of 13 years at Blizzard. I worked on many different things, primarily worked on class design. So I worked on many different classes, almost pretty much all of them at some point. Most of my work, I think, is probably on, like, say, priest or druid or hunter, warlock, and then I also designed the monk class, and then I also worked on a lot of PvP content, so battlegrounds, arenas, the war mode system, things like that. So
Nice, very good.
yeah.
I actually came into contact with you, which is why I kind of wanted to do this. I won't get into too much detail about it, but I made a video a really long time ago, maybe 2 years ago. And I've always been making the same type of videos. Just recently, people liked my videos more so now. But back then, you know, you just post into YouTube, nobody finds your videos. I was just this loud guy ranting all the time about different things wrong with the game. And I made a video, which is why I want to do this, because I made the video with the intention of saying, Blizzard, like, there's things wrong with the game, in specific, in reference to class balance. And I just wanted some communication to the community, not to specifically me. And I remember just saying, like, just please communicate with us a bit more. And that was what I was advocating for. And I posted the video, and I think it got like 7,000 views, or maybe 10,000 views. I don't know. And that same day, you reached out to me and you just said, hey, I saw your video. And at that time, I was like, wow, like, somebody reached out to me because of my video that worked at Blizzard. And that kind of changed my perspective about a lot of things, because I had this assumption, which is what I kind of wanted to spell in this, but I also want to address some of the complaints that players do have, and then maybe get some clarification on some of those things. but I also wanted to make this to dispel those narratives that may exist within the community through talking with you. And it pushed me to make videos like I make today, and it changed the way I approach some of them. So I thought it'd be a really, really good experience for everyone. And I think it would also be really cool for people listening to listen to you, who's been designing and working on the game for, you said 13 years or so. Mm-hmm. And then me, who's been playing the game for 13 plus years. So I think although you played as well, me too. And I think it'd be cool to kind of have that conversation. So
sure. Yeah. Yeah. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Say that. Yeah. Yeah. I forgot the video was on. It was probably, was it on Balance or something? What was it?
It was on Balance. It was about communication to the community.
Oh, right.
My thumbnails sucked back then. And
no, it's so fun. No, I watch like almost any video about things that I create or we work on.
Really?
And so yeah. And I think most designers do that, right? That's part of the, to be a good designer, you really need to seek out feedback to validate a lot of your theses and assumptions on how things work or how they're designed, right? And so I've always really enjoyed your channel. I think it's a good mix of really really good detailed feedback, but then also entertaining, and that's always the challenge, right? To get a viewership and stuff is not just be info, but also be entertaining to listen to as well.
Yeah. So you do watch videos on YouTube. Developers do watch the videos on YouTube, you would say.
I'm not going to speak for all of them, but right. I would say the good ones should be, all of them should be doing that, right? Sometimes it can get tricky. Some designers are more sensitive to feedback than others in terms of if it comes off as bad faith or trolly or whatever, they may be sensitive to that. Me personally, I've been a gamer since forever. And so I've heard the worst possible things said about me, from players in lobbies or whatever, booted out of intro channels, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm not super sensitive to any negative feedback. I can drill through to hear the nuggets of things that I need to know. Right.
Okay. Well, let's hop into that. It's, I have the, actually, let's start with this really quickly. Number one, there's some parameters to this. I have a bunch of questions on my left side. I have 4 pages worth. So I'm probably not going to get to them all.
Yeah.
Number two, like Death Knight Chris, which we'll talk about in a second, I have an alien that will randomly invade my computer once per day, and you'll see a giant Pepe flash on my screen, and everything will flash and flash back on. So that may happen. It's going to be a little scuffed. Chris's mic might go weird. We'll edit that. So there's things that might happen, and I will not get to everything that I want to ask, but I'll do my absolute best. So if I didn't, why didn't you ask this? I just have so many things that I want to ask. So those are some parameters before we get into this. But
I've seen your editing skills, so I'm pretty comfortable with this. You could edit the Death Knight Chris out if you
we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So that's one thing. But on that topic, actually, that you were talking about a second ago about maybe having thick skin or some people being more sensitive to it, I remember specifically, this is just an example, you tweeted something out, and this is kind of going to address, I think, a lot of the stuff on Twitter from the community, because everyone tweets at Warcraft devs, right? That's just the thing that you do when you're angry about the game, at Warcraft devs, at Halinka, at Chris Kalecki, right? That's what people do every time something's wrong with the game, even though you may not be responsible for it. So I remember you put out something, and I don't know if I responded, but I wanted to respond so bad. You tweeted out, it was that thing that people were doing on Twitter, how it started. And it was like everyone was showing a game. I think that's what it was. It was something like that, how it started.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that, right? Like where it all began.
Yeah.
And you put out a Pokemon thing, and I can see the Ash Ketchum hat behind you. So you put out a little Pokemon thing. And then some guy commented, and I wanted to respond so bad. I don't know if I did. I can't remember. And he said, well, at least in Pokemon, you can change your Pokemon whenever you want. And it was in reference to being able to change your covenants whenever you want. And I wanted to say, like, so maybe he's not even responsible for that. Like, maybe that's not his decision. He doesn't have the say on those things. He has his thing. Maybe he could give some suggestions. Maybe he's for it, but whatever. Why do you, like, direct to him on his own personal Twitter? Like, he's putting out a Twitter post just like every other human being. Why do you have to comment on that? And it really frustrated me. And then I know there's a few other times some of these developers will tweet out, I won't go into names and specifics, but they'll tweet out saying like, oh, I'm tired of getting harassed, or I wish so bad I could say something. Somebody said something like that recently. And I've had interactions like that as well. And I know Helenka will post things too. He'll get, sometimes some comments on there. So do you think that has any negative impact on the devs willing to listen to the community? Does that create that distance that players already feel exists? Does it further that? Or do you think that at the end of the day, developers are just going to continue to do the same level of work regardless of how the community treats them?
That's a really good question. I mean, first of all, that's a funny reply to my tweet though. I think I like that one. Yeah. I think it's interesting because of course this is something that I don't think anyone really has the answer to, right? There's no sort of playbook in terms of like developers should be open or not open or whatever. There's different methods. Blizzard, I think, traditionally has always been more traditional. So they have a community manager, they have people that are trained and credentialed and whatnot to be able to give feedback to the community and things like that. And but I think, if you look at Riot, they're more of where they like having the developers right in the front of the players and be able to speak openly and directly to them. I think really the first one at the studio who was very kind of open and direct and utilized social media was my ex lead, Greg Street, who was on the WoW team, and he was very Ghost Crawler. He was very active on Twitter and on the forums and whatnot, and so was I. I really like that. Like it. I like talking to the players. That's why I'm talking to you. I do like interfacing with the players, and I didn't get the chance to do that at Blizzard as much as I would like because of their stance on it. I can understand their stance, and the stance is really not so much to, make it harder to communicate to the team. It's really, like you're saying with some developers and whatnot on Twitter who kind of are more sensitive to feedback and to feeling like they're being attacked and stuff. Not everybody is personally equipped to be able to deal with it, right? And so, but personally, I do think it's good to have an open dialogue with the players directly. I think we're in this era where players like to have an authentic relationship with the developers, and really, most developers and designers are really passionate and they like hearing feedback on their ideas. There's been designers who have left or developers who have left the WoW team to go to smaller teams at the studio, of games that aren't announced yet even, and they always lament to me that it's kind of sucks not to hear feedback quickly from the players, because we take it for granted, but I'll put a spell into the game and guess what, it goes live a month or so later, and I get, the fruits of my labor are seen quickly. But if you're traditionally with developers, you're creating something for years, no one's seen it, it goes live, and it may be good, maybe bad, you don't know. And so it gets really maddening to not have this feedback quickly, at least for me personally. But
I feel that I can see the perspective a lot, just because although I don't do the same work as you, I deal with the community a lot and I read a lot of their comments. And over time, I've started to realize more and more and more that some people are, I know this sounds like a generalization, but some people are just very angry and they're just looking to get angry. And I think that I would understand that sometimes it's very, regardless of who you are, maybe you want to have open communication, but it can be frustrating to have these people kind of harassing you sometimes on certain accounts and things like that. I read some of the comments and I'm just like, it's a little too much, right? Too much anger in some of these comments, because it's hard to have a conversation with them. It's hard to like learn anything from what they're trying to say. It's hard to have that dialogue that you might be looking for as a developer, right? So I could see both ways, but yeah, I would ideally hope that every developer is open to communication, because I think a lot of the players do feel that they have some input on what should happen with the game, because they're the ones that are playing it, right? We're the biggest testers, right? We're the ones that literally play the product every single day. Some people 12 hours a day. That's my life. So
yeah, I mean, what I would, so I get asked this question now and then, which is just that how do we give feedback, or how best can I give feedback that the developers will listen to it and process it and things like that. And I always say, well, the best way to do it is kind of write a well-informed forum post, and don't make it trolly and call out people, name call people or whatever, and try to give examples. I think a lot of times players will want to suggest how to fix it, which is natural, but I think it's more important to talk about the scenarios of the problem, because that's a designer's job to figure out the solution, and a lot of times the player solution isn't going to be the best one. So yeah, focus on the problems, focus on telling the story of what was causing that problem and issue, and do that in depth. But I totally get that players are passionate, and whenever I see someone yell at me or the team or something about a problem, I know it's coming from a place to where they really care about the game and they want it to succeed. They want the team to succeed. It's just they're passionate, right?
Right.
And before I worked at Blizzard, actually, when I was younger and stupid, I used to post on the forums as well, and I would sometimes I would title a thread, so and so should be fired. Yeah. And it was really funny because I said, actually, the game director should be fired, and that's who hired me, actually. And so I was like, oh man, I hope he didn't look through my forum history to see the things I said. I kind of went through the forum to see if I could delete it, but I don't think.
I mean, that exists with Ian today, though. Like I hear, that's just the reality. I hear that a lot. Like I'll just see it, I'll read it, and I'm just
And I think people know about Kaplan or Fraziabi and other designers who are passionate when they were players also, and voice their concerns to they have request developers and things like that. And so it's natural, right? So
let's. I have so many things, but this is one of the questions. So since we're on topic, let's kind of dive into it. Feedback. So we're talking about feedback, but I think first let's talk about an example, okay? And then we'll go into what I think the frustration really is for a lot of players. So here's an example specifically in BFA.
Yeah.
Season 3 and Season 4 Destruction Warlock. Okay?
Yeah.
It was vocalized on Twitter. It was vocalized on the forums. There was YouTube videos about it. People were very upset. And it wasn't the only class, I would say, that was really strong at the time. Fire Mages, Assassination Rogues, Holy Paladins. These were all classes they were playing together a lot in Arena. Not specifically so much in RBGs. I don't know. We'll talk about RBGs later because I know it's something that you're super interested in as well. It's something that you like to do. So specifically, I guess, Arena, 2v2, 3v3. Players, and I'm only using this as an example, right? There are other classes we talk about. But they were so vocal about it. Tournament players, I made videos, people were on the forums, and I made a video actually kind of going through like people talking about it. And it feels like when you do write up a forum post, and there's so many posts on there, right? Like there's so many that get flooded on. If you go to the forums, it's, for me, I would say, just being honest, it's a scary place. If I was it's a really scary place. There's just so many things, and some things are super misinformed. Some things are accurate, and it gets flooded with people saying, no, not this. It's players arguing. It's a lot of arguing happening on the forums, not really a place for suggestions and feedback. So the first thing I'll ask is, does Blizzard, or do you know of any people that would try to communicate with players directly to get feedback about class balance? That's the first question. And then if not, where should players go? Because on the forums, the assumption from everyone that I talk to is that they don't read the forums, or maybe they do, but they don't communicate it, right? If there's an issue in the game, right, you could clarify saying, hey, we know this class is problematic. We're not sure how to tune it, but be vocal about knowing something exists. Another example would be the mind control bug that exists right now in the game, right? So vocal about it. And then there's no communication with the current team about, hey, we know it exists. We can't fix it yet, right? We don't know how to fix it, but we know it exists. But if you don't say anything, it creates this narrative that Blizzard's not in touch, or that they don't care, or they don't play their own game. That's what I hear, as a player. And if you don't say anything, it's like you don't know. Maybe you do know, but communicating it could go a long way. Just the fact that you know it exists. So the question, I guess, really is when problems exist like this and they don't communicate that they're reading the feedback, where's the best place to go to ensure that they will see it? Is it Twitter, forums, etc., videos?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I feel like all the above. I think it shouldn't matter where you're posting it, whether it is Twitter or a forum post or a Reddit thread or a video. It's not up to the player to really make sure that they're min-maxing where this like feedback is given. Although I do kind of think, I think any of them are fine. I think tweets, although I read a lot of tweets and I know a lot of developers are on Twitter, and they're probably on Twitter more than the other social medias.
Right.
It's so easy for it to just get lost there, but I think tweeting is okay. Tweet the developers and tag Warcraft devs also. The developers less likely to personally respond just because there's a policy of not personally responding generally. I broke that rule many times and sometimes get in trouble for that.
Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. but yeah, and so it's, if you don't get a response, I wouldn't worry about it. It doesn't necessarily mean they don't know about the issue or have thinking about a solution. Many times the players are voicing concerns that we already know about, because we have a QA department of really amazing people who suss out these problems, a lot of times earlier before they even go live. And so the team knows about it. There's just a lag between knowing about it and doing something. Sometimes it does go on way too long, like the Destruction Warlock situation you're talking about. The reason why that takes a long time to be addressed is it's complicated. It's many different reasons. Sometimes developers who are who should be the ones fixing that are tied up in something, another feature they're working on, or whatever, right? Or the decision maybe is caught up in this sort of, something that I find annoying on the team towards the end is just there's a lot of, we really need to like, the team really feels like they need to have consensus on something. So there's stakeholders of people you need to convince and get them on board with the change. And sometimes, we're disagreeing about what should be changed, sort of like a bureaucracy sort of thing.
Yeah.
Think about like a Congress or a Senate.
Yeah.
That's kind of what the designer group is like, is
Yeah.
there's a bunch of people who are trying to pitch things and get people on board. And it's important that everyone is sort of on board with things, because, it can cause political issues with teammates and things like that. But yeah, and so that's another example of something that could make it take a while. And then sometimes, it may be like, yeah, it's broken, but they're like, well, let's just see if how it rides out,
Yeah.
And because it's challenging, because really PvP balance, it's a meta game that shifts constantly,
right?
If you look at, say, WoW Classic or things like that, there's maybe metas in WoW Classic that weren't active 15 years ago, just because someone tried something that wasn't tried back then, and then now it's the new meta, right? It's a living sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we're just reluctant to do a knee-jerk change to be like, oh, this rep paladins are destroying, and nerf them by 30%, and then they just get killed, and maybe another comp could have countered them, right? I remember back during BC, my guild used to run this comp which was called 2345 or something. It was like shaman it's like shaman, it was like mage, warrior, priest, paladin, shaman, I think. And at the time, everyone's like, this is undefeatable, this is bullshit, fives is broken. But then another comp called the Euro comp came out that countered it, and it had like a warlock and rogue instead of a warrior and mage or something. And then that became like the comp everyone's like, oh, this is the main comp now, right? And so, if they would have nerfed that comp too soon, it wouldn't have naturally just sort of addressed itself. And so all these things is like, well, what is the best practice here? What do you do? This is really the art of game design, right?
Yeah.
And so there is no right answer, but you just have to utilize your experiences and instinct to decide what the best way to go is, right?
See, the thing is, I feel like the right answer from my perspective is that not the design of it, right? Not like what you do, but the communication that it exists, right? Like whatever internally with Blizzard that happens today, whatever holds them back from having somebody in charge of just saying, hey, we know this exists. We hear your feedback on this. That would dispel so much of this narrative the separation between the communities. I don't think Blizzard has to really do changes to appease a lot of people, like make people happy, I should say. But they could just communicate that they're listening. Oh, this mind control bug, we know it exists, right? That's we're working on it. You don't have to say why it's taking so long. Maybe they're caught up in something. But that issue that exists with Blizzard today, I think, is one of their biggest, like as a player, their biggest downfalls, 100%. Because I know some people will be upset that at least they're communicating, and I know in some cases saying nothing might be better than saying something, but I really don't believe that exists. I feel like, hey, we know these classes are very strong. We're looking to see how things are going to play out. That's it. Just a simple, we hear you, because right now the community thinks that they don't care, and I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case when nobody cares over there. But if you don't say anything,
no, I don't. Nobody who works on a team, I would say, doesn't care. But they're just sort of. I mean, you're not. I'm going to completely agree with you that the communication barrier is a problem, and if I was the king of the team,
yeah, of course you can. I know.
Whatever,
yeah, I know
that would be something that I would want to change, but. There's a lot of challenges there in terms of their philosophy and how they want to run things, and the other part of it too is if the developers are constantly on Twitter or on the forums or whatever, like it takes up a meaningful amount of your time,
sure,
day to day. And really the philosophy of the studio is not to really have a huge amount of developers. It's supposed to be kind of min-max to be a tighter group. And so if you have a lot of your contributors who are supposed to be working on things, constantly noodling and giving feedback to things on the forums, that could be challenging too,
right.
I don't really have the answers here, but I do agree with you, and I agree with anybody who feels like the communication isn't as direct as they feel it should be, right?
I don't mean it has to be on Twitter, just a monthly blue post, just a monthly blue post, state of the game update, these are the issues that we're aware of. I think that would go a really long way for just all the players and the relationship, I would say.
Yeah.
So let's kind of get off of this. I just wanted to kind of talk about that and clarify some of that as well, because I guess the takeaway there is that they're aware of the stuff that players think that they're maybe not aware of, but there's just things in the way preventing it from happening, right? That's like the clear takeaway, just time or other projects, or they have to get consensus on things. That's what kind of
yeah, but I'll add a little to that too. It just I think some of it is sort of like the culture of the player base as well. It's just I think there's a reluctance to be so open with the players, because you just get eaten up alive. If it doesn't turn out the way that you said originally, or I think the ideal is the designers kind of think openly and just kind of talk about, be honest and transparent about, like, we're thinking about this is what we tried to do. Maybe it didn't work, but we're thinking about this or that. And there's one way to interpret that as like, wow, they're being very transparent and open, and it's cool to see how they're thinking. The other, the bad faith one is like, they have no idea what they're doing. Yeah. And they said they were doing this and they didn't do it, and what happened, right? Like Greg always used to say this thing, is like, they promised me a pony or whatever, and if you don't deliver on that, people get mad. But so yeah, it's very complicated.
No, I'm glad you added that in, because of course I would agree. They're very, the player base is I guess fickle in some ways, so they're very ready to rage if you make a mistake. So I would agree. So let's talk about your Shadowlands PvP experience so far, or just in general. That's going to lead into some other topics, but that we went into that topic that was going to be later on in this, but it was just kind of like chained that way together, which is great. So let's talk about your Shadowlands PvP experience so far. So just give me some things that you like about it. Maybe, and you could talk about things that aren't PvP related, but and then things that you like about it and things that you don't necessarily like about it.
Yeah. So my PvP experience so far, I'm really kind of mostly playing casually right now. I haven't been doing too much rated arenas, but I've been doing some rated battlegrounds. I've done several hours of that with my guild, and that's been fun. Of course, just queuing random battlegrounds and things like that. Been playing a priest right now. I'm healer priest.
Disc or holy?
Disc. Yeah. Although I mean, I like Holy as well, but just kind of playing Disc right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I like about it. I like kind of the pacing is nice, especially in Battlegrounds. I really don't like when the Battleground turns into this thing where it's just like everybody, no one dies and no one runs out of mana and it's all AoE and dots and things like that. So that gets really toxic in my view. We try to do a lot of things to try to counteract that. It's funny because with Greater Power Blast we get a lot of feedback that's so bursty and things like that. But in Raid of Battlegrounds, it was actually nice to have Greater Power Blast because it made direct damage, single target damage scary, and which is traditionally not the case. It's usually, who cares about direct damage? It's all AoE padding damage, right? Endurance sort of thing. But so yeah, it's kind of great to see that in RBGs. Of course, like it could get too much to where it's like people just die without you can humanly react, and there is a little bit of that with different abilities.
We'll get to that. Yeah,
exactly. But I like the pacing. Every new season, and especially the first season of expansion, is always fun because all your friends come back and things like that, so that adds a lot to it. I like the gearing system. I think it's probably the best it's been in a while, for a lot of different reasons. So that's been good. Things I don't know if you want me to talk about things I don't like.
Go for it. Yeah, take your time.
Oh yeah.
This is open. You can ask me questions. You can do whatever you want. Yeah, dude, feel comfortable.
Yeah. Things I don't like. Of course, there's always going to be certain abilities or talents or things that didn't pan out or work. There's a couple of those this expansion as well. There always is. There's never going to be a flawless execution of anything. And so yeah, there's a couple of those. The Arden Wheel pod thing drives me nuts.
The bug with it was crazy though. The bug where you could see it, you could target it. It was 10 feet up. Now it takes up your entire screen. I don't know how that thing is like that. And then you could bot, you could stack it, you could heal it. It was just. Then I know you tweeted about, or you said something about it where the flag it would if you died with it, the flag would still be held by the pod.
That's what.
And
really,
then they fixed it though,
that
right?
Should be out. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Did they?
They put out a little thing that they addressed that. Just the last patch notes. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. Yeah, I mean that it's funny, and it's not like the end of the world. And that's sometimes still, when these things are so broken or crazy, I'm like, well, is it that bad? Like maybe it's okay, maybe because you don't want to make the game sterile, and once you just cut off all the like the spikiness, then it just becomes flat and boring, right? And that's not good either,
right? And
so it's tricky to know when to do it, and so it is. The pod is cool. I just think there's a little rough edges there that should just kind of sand down a little bit, but. The pod thing, kind of convoke the spirits, is just kind of wild, but
yeah, full moon, a planet drops on your head for your entire health pool.
Yeah. I like the because I was also watching the tournament earlier, and they asked what's everyone's favorite ability, and someone on one of the casters was saying he likes convoke the spirits, who thinks it's exciting, and so I can understand why, but
with Stoopzz, right?
Yeah, I think
it has to be Stoopzz.
Yeah, he plays the balance druid. Yeah, he plays the balance druid. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think.
So just some major abilities you feel, and everything else you've been enjoying about it so far.
Yeah. I'm always sad to see when certain specs don't do well at the beginning of the season. It's always kind of the same ones. Usually ones who are better when the matches go on longer, like Warlocks, Affliction, or Hunters maybe, and so but I think as the season goes on and as the expansion goes on, those specs will become stronger.
Is that the understanding? Okay, is that the understanding? Is that your understanding, or you think that would, again, you can't speak for everybody, but when you were there, was that the team's understanding about classes and that's how they worked, or is that your understanding, you would say? Because that's the understanding I have, right? Like a lot of players. I made a video saying like, let's relax. Like I'm a big fan of frequent small tunings because unlike other games, you're not attached to the, you are maybe like some people get really attached to Bridget in Overwatch, or maybe they play Yasuo in League of Legends. If they alter that character, then it starts to feel like, oh, that's my main. But it's not like, but it's not the same as this character you geared, you did the Covenant, you did the campaign, you did all this stuff, and then they nerf it. It feels really bad, right? So I made a video saying let's relax and let, but I still want frequent small tunings, right? Because what happens, it feels like, is that, you know, you'll go a few months and then the nerf bat will come. That's what people say. And then you wait a few months and then the nerf bat will happen. But if you kind of do this gradual tuning to some of the underperforming, you know, overperforming, I think it spices up the game a lot as well, because you feel like the meta is shifting without having to wait for legendaries and conduits and HP to do that. But there are classes like the Affliction Warlock. First week, brutal, right? You're just getting obliterated by these melee cleaves, right? Or just whatever, this rep paladin runs in and just one taps you. And then I was like, oh my god, Warlock sucks. And I was like, no, dude, just wait. Like, it always happens. Warlocks are going to come back with huge health pools. And it's starting to happen where I can't touch them. I play a lot. So I'm a big multi-class person because I like to make videos about things. I'm playing Warrior, Disc Priest, Holy Paladin. I have a Windwalker, big Monk main for a while. So I played a lot of stuff. And mostly playing Warrior now because it's very meta. And I can't get to these guys I'm slowed. I can't get there. I'm getting super frustrated. He's doing ridiculous amounts of damage. And yes, he's squishy, but then he has the little Night Fae teleport, you know, turns into a fox. And it's just, you know, it's happening, right? It's starting to get to a place again. I'm seeing Destra Warlocks again. PTSD, like, I can't believe this is happening again, because they're going to get there, the HP. But players don't see that. So I think it'd be cool to talk about if that's, you think, the understanding of the team. They know that, and that maybe that's why they don't make specific changes to those types of classes early on, or thoughts on that?
Good question. I don't know, like, what everyone on the team feels like. I think if I would say this, they'd probably agree with that. I mean, you just have to look at it historically, right?
Right.
And this is what usually the case is. Just that, you know, when survivability increases, well, guess what? The endurance comps come back with a vengeance. Usually they're Warlock and Resto Druid and maybe Hunter, or whatever they are. And then the burst ones complain that they can no longer wombo somebody quickly, and and then so they want help, right? And so you gotta know this when you're balancing the game, because if for example, if they buff Affliction a lot right now to try to counteract them being not great, well then if survivability increases through the expansion, well then now you just juice them up, right? And that won't be good. But it's also should be a priority, and it's always been sort of a priority. And sometimes they think this works this way, but it never really does. It's just that it's consistent what the damage and survivability are, right? Yes, it's common that in the beginning of the expansion, from historical, if you look at it historically, that it's burstier and then it gets less burstier over time. But I think the developers would like to think that it's consistent all throughout the expansion, but it never really is that case. It just, for a lot of different reasons. I think BFA was kind of, I think even Legion. I think Legion, at the end of Legion, it got really kind of, games got really long, right?
It did, but I would say Legion was, for me, in the past, you know, we have BFA, Legion was pretty consistent. You know, you had these one shots that were still available, but you saw a lot of Warlocks. But it felt more bursty than I would say BFA did towards the end, outside of like Mage Lock and, you know, how much damage they were doing and stuff like that with the haste. I mean, that was just, I don't know, man. That expansion at the end, I just couldn't believe. I felt like I was playing a different game. It was
you're in Torghast.
Yeah, it was literally it was Torghast Arena. It was insane.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember blinking. I'll never forget blinking and seeing a Chaos Bolt just fly. I didn't see it. Like, I couldn't kick it. It was just so fast. You know, G-Pies were just winging down the pipe. I always make this comparison. It's like when I was playing a melee cleave at the time and just having fun with my friends, and it felt like I was going into a battlefield when I fought Mage Lock. You know, like my brain I would lose. It would start to melt. Like, I couldn't play for longer than an hour because I couldn't pay attention to everything. It was just, everything was, you know, fears, sheeps, G-Pies, and I'm speaking so fast, trying to call everything out. I can't do it so fast, you know. I'm like, sheep, and I'm just dead. You know, it was so fast because of all that haste. It was a little too much, but yeah. I would agree with what you're saying, though. Yeah.
No, yeah. And a lot of that's because there's these progression systems that go on for the expansion, whether they're Azerite or the artifacts from Legion, I guess, powers. And just a lot of times, sometimes they add more damage than they do survivability, or the more survivability than they do damage, and that what contributes a lot to the meta shifting. And so it's something they're aware of, and it's something that they try to balance for. But it's a complicated game with so many different vectors of things going on. It could, it's not easy, and so, but that's usually where it's caused from. But yeah.
Okay, so let's get on to. I guess I could share my experience so far, and then we'll talk about 2 other things.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. So yeah, feel free if you're ever interested. Yeah, I don't mind that as well. I love to talk, so as you can tell. So the thing I was gonna say was, my experience was, very happy with the gearing, because from where it was, very happy. I love the wholesome PvP experience where it feels like now I'm doing everything. Late at night, I might do some just regular BGs to farm some honor. I do think, though, that on alts, I think the honor from regular BGs should be a little higher, in my opinion. I think when you were first doing it, it was fine because you were kind of gate, like you couldn't, that was it. Like that was the cap. No one was getting more gear. So now it feels like if I start a new tune, it is a ridiculous amount of honor, and we'll get into why it's harder to do RBGs or arena to farm that conquest and honor with no gear. So you're kind of in that BG route unless you have buddies that will carry you through stuff. But I do feel like, and initially I made videos about too, thinking that at first I'm like, oh, this is fine. But now I'm feeling like, okay, it's too much honor. Like it's like 3 honor caps to get everything going now, to upgrade the PvP, the conquest gear, to upgrade your gear to rank 7. It's quite a bit of honor. So I think it's a little low.
A lot of honor to get, honor to get, or that you're given so much honor, you're saying?
A lot of honor. You need a lot of honor. At first, I thought you were getting like a good amount. There's the quest and everything, but now if you start a new tune, you need 3 honor caps. You need to. Now, if I could send my honor to alts, I would love that. Or if if BGs gave me more honor, that would be great. I do like the idea of that BG weekly thing. I think you do get those. You get extra honor from BGs. I think that would be great if it was more regular. Because I do think at the end of the day, casual battlegrounds, random battlegrounds are what I grew up on doing. It was one of those things that I would just do those, not too serious. And I get honor from that. And then I get my gear. It's just a lot of gears. You have to rank up so many times. And you need so much. I started a paladin last week, playing like 12 hours a day. Yeah. Just grinding arena, trying to get some honor. And it's a lot to catch up on. So that's one thing. But I love it overall. Gearing system is great overall, and we'll talk about something about the gearing thing in a second here. Don't love Torghast too much. Like Twisting Corridors more than I thought. Do not like regular Torghast. It's just too short. It's like by the time I get rolling, it's over. I start getting these cool powers.
Interesting.
Yeah, or if I got more powers quicker, it just feels like by the time I get this cool build going, it's over, and I start all over on week again. Twisting Corridors is cool, but then it feels like everything homogenizes into the same build. That's how I feel.
Do you do it solo or with a group? Or
now I do it with the friends, just like Visions, because I've done it so many times that I need to AFK my brain because I've done it so many times. But yeah, I don't mind doing it solo. I did at 3 a.m. on a Monday night because I need to get my Soul Ash before the reset. So that's just the typical Vision experience. That's what that was like. I like the wholesome experience. Rating, well, let's get into it. So I feel like this is something I want to talk about. I heard you on the Technically PvP thing about gearing and their comments on gearing. And I love those people. This is no shade or anything like that. It was just didn't agree. It felt like what was stated. So we'll explain it here. A lot of the community earlier on, I think this myth is starting to be dispelled, is that PvP gearing still was inferior to PvE gearing, or PvEers had an advantage to gearing because of PvP. And earlier on, before the game came out, I remember I got flooded because people talked about the conquest cap being too low. There was all this conversation about it, and I don't think you had left Blizzard at this point. So everyone was asking me make a video to talk about the conquest cap, like it's too low, and I was like, no, I don't think it's too low. I think that seems like it's kind of on pace. Could be a little higher, but I think it's very similar to what you would expect from getting gear from raiding and stuff like that. So I remember Andolin on there, he said something. You asked him, what do you think about the gearing system? And Garrisar said that he felt like it was a kick in the nuts because of like how you're a renowned captain, your honor gear, and it doesn't feel good that if you don't want to do any rated content, you're behind in gearing. Andolin said that, another host there said that he feels like Mythic Plus is lower hanging fruit, and that PvP gearing, you're capped, you can't get everything right away. And I really had to disagree because it was the same thing that I heard from a lot of people, and this is what I hear in my comments. Stoopzz, it's not fair that PvEers have all of this gear and PvPers don't. And I always ask them, and he said the same thing. Well, how much Mythic Plus or rating do you do? And they go, well, I don't do any of it.
Yeah.
And I do all of it. I do the raid, I Mythic raid, I do Mythic Plus, I do the whole game. Yeah. I like PvP the most, but I do the whole game. Mythic Plus gearing sucks. It sucks. You get no loot at the end of the dungeon. Most people aren't going to time a 15, right? Like right now, maybe they will now, but at the beginning, most people weren't timing a 15, right? So you get one item. So you have a 1 in 5 chance of getting the item, right? And then you have a 1 in 10 chance, however many items are on the loot table, because you're not timing it, you get one item. 1 in 10 to get the item you want. And it might take you 45 minutes. You have to get the group together. They have to check your IO. And then if you raid, you might get one. I've gotten one item the entire raid. One item. And it could be a duplicate. It could be bad stats. So I had no problem with people spamming dungeons the first week, just degenning it up the entire first week to get all, whatever advantage they could early. Because that's how it's always been, And back in the day, if you had a vendor, you were always capped on how many arena points you could get. You were always capped. Like you could push higher and higher and get a little bit more, but essentially you couldn't get like buy everything the first week. It was always like some kind of soft cap or cap. So if you wanted to get an advantage, you did everything in the game to gear faster. But if the end result is the same, and now I feel like Mythic Plus result isn't the same because you're getting 210 capped below heroic, 1600 RBG arena rating gives you 213, which is heroic raid gear, and you can choose exactly what you want. 1800 is 6 item levels lower than mythic rating, and most guilds aren't going to even clear a mythic raid, right? We're 5 of 10 or whatever. So you could go that whole week, and if you're getting on average one item per raid, you might not even get the item that week. So you're not getting anything where some guy gets to buy everything and has the vault and has the catch-up system. It was just like, that was the complaint I heard a lot from the community about, I just couldn't wrap my head around how people were complaining about the gearing system. So I guess my question to you is, what do you think about, because now it seems like a lot of PvEers are doing PvP. It's kind of the opposite of BFA. There's a lot of videos out there. Dratnos made a video. This guy named Yumi TV, he's Growl, big Mythic Plus guy, made a video saying that you kind of got to do PvP. The Raiders are talking about how they're doing PvP, and in BFA, the complete opposite. PvPers were doing PvE to get gear for PvP. So what is your take on this situation where it's like, oh, it's PvP gearing's better than PvE, or PvEers have it better, and this gearing, fiasco where these two communities seem like, although you want to merge them, don't seem like they get along too well in terms of their progression and gearing.
Yeah.
I know that was a long thing, but yeah.
No. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying here. It's just it's been a challenge for the game since the beginning,
Yeah.
And there's many different philosophies and viewpoints of how it should be, on the team and different developers. The guild that I ran in Classic and still run today, we would raid and we would we got server first. This was on Tichondrius at the time, of different raid bosses, and we loved raiding, but we raided to PvP. We raided to get gear to PvP. A lot of times, I had to change the loot system a bunch of times because we had a DKP system, and our main tank was passing all the tank gear because he wanted the two-hander, for PvP. And I'm like, dude, you got to get the tank gear because otherwise we're going to not be able to do the bosses. And so I had to think about a different gearing system because of that, right? And so what's interesting is after BC came out, Arena, of course, came out, and you can gear by yourself or with two other friends or a couple doing Arena. And suddenly the guild started to fall apart in terms of rating because people just want to do Arena instead. And I get that because the guild was primarily a PvP guild. This is the thing that they enjoyed most of all. But I would say for most people, it was sort of bittersweet because, yes, they were able to PvP all the time, but we also didn't raid as a guild together, and that was also fun. And so we struggled to find the balance there, especially since there was teams in my guild who want to become pro players, and so it was really important for them. It was like a career thing, but they were also our top DPS in our raid, and so it was tricky, right? And so, but I would say, WoW, me personally, WoW is best when you play it holistically, when you play both, like what you say you do, where you play all different aspects of the game, you get the full experience. But the question is for the developers, how do you tune the game, or what is the vision, right? Certainly I've had leads and there's been different directors who have different visions of what they feel like this should be. Sometimes it's like people should choose what they want to do. So if they want to do Arena and gear completely in Arena, we should support that because that is the type of player that we have as part of our audience. WoW is many different things to many different people, and so we should support that, right? That's one view. Another view is no, it should be played holistically. We want to have the full spectrum experience to be the most optimal. That's another view, right? And so those are always competing with each other, right? Yeah. But what is the answer? There's no real set answer. Again, it's just a different vision of what the team has at any given time. I think with this expansion, it's probably more about it being rewarding the player who does many different things. You see this in the vault design, right? It's encouraging you to check all those boxes, and I think it's been successful in that, and encouraging the player to do all these different experiences. I think in my guild, they want to be able to, they want random battlegrounds to feel rewarding because they enjoy them, but the way that the culture of the game and the type of player who plays it, just because they enjoy something, they may not want to just do it just because it's not rewarding. You need the extrinsic and the intrinsic together to really make the player feel like it's worthwhile their time. So yeah, I think they've done a good job with that so far. And there's always this kind of anxiety in the team if, like what you're saying, these influencers or YouTubers or whoever who feel compelled to PvP, is it because, are they happy about that or not? Because if they're not happy about it, that may affect the team and feeling like they're making raiders do something they don't like, or vice versa, and that could maybe shift things, right? And so, but I would say don't be so reactionary. Just let it play out and see how it goes, because but again, it just depends on what you got to figure out a vision and go through with that, right? I think a lot of times they're not sure what the best way to go. It depends on any given day. Like if there's there's a huge Reddit post blowing up about it, they may feel like, oh my God, let's change it. They're upset or something, right? But I think just hold true to what you feel is the best version of the game and stick with that, which I feel it's doing a pretty good job currently of.
So for me, I love it, but that's selfishly, because I do feel like if you're a PvPer, it's amazing. I feel like what's happening for those players that are it, because there's no stat on it. Ultimately there's no PvP stat on it, right? So you can't lower the item level of the item. What they did is they made it heavy verse, which is something that said if you didn't want to do PvP stat, maybe consider doing versatility gear. But because players are trying to gear so fast in an expansion, They're trying to gear so fast in the expansion that's not supposed to be gear. You're not supposed to gear fast as an expansion. Everything's reduced. It's capped conquest at a low number. The raid drops less loot. Mythic Plus drops less loot. They don't want players to just rip through gear really quickly because there's no Titan forging and all these different things on the items, right? So the issue is that players are trying to get to this crazy item level really, really quickly. They're trying to speed run this game, which the game tries to restrict you. And I think a lot of PvEers early are opting to take this versatility gear. And in the long term, if you're trying to optimize your character, you're not going to want that gear. But it is the highest item level gear you can get early on. And you get one per week. So for me, I think ultimately it's a good system, but it does seem super hard to balance. Like, how do you balance PvE versus PvP gear? It's like, it's always going to be this issue where I don't know if it's ever going to be at a place where everyone's happy. But I do think this is way better. Again, I raid and everything. You know, I do Mythic Plus and everything. I don't mind going out to get an item that comes from the raid. I mean, it sucks when you don't get the item, but I love that day when you do loot the boss and then you finally get that sick weapon. You're just so excited. It makes your whole day. I always go celebrate with some In-N-Out. It's like my ritual. That's what I always did that. It was funny. Raw den weapons. I'll never forget about it. I used to go to In-N-Out depressed and I would order 2 double doubles and some french fries and a milkshake when I never got this raw den weapon. I wanted it for so long. And it was my ritual. My guild knew it too. They'd always say, it's Tuesday night ritual. I'm like, yeah, I didn't get it again. And the day I got it, I still celebrated with the same exact meal, but this time it was
that's awesome.
A bit better. So I enjoy that, but I know it's not for everyone. And personally, I think I want to enable players. I would like to enable players to pursue what they want in the game because I think that keeps them more interested in the game, right? If they get to do what they enjoy.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about like the stats and the gear because it's like versatility or whatnot. But the versatility really isn't really just a PvP stat. It's useful in PvE as well, right? And that's another question that always comes up as well. Is like, well, should PvP gear have specific stats on it, right? Like there's been that many times in the past with resilience or PvP eye level, right? That was a way of trying to like say, okay, you could have high eye level in PvP, but stay out of raids. Or, you know, you're always going to be worse than the raiders, right? Or the PvE side of the game. And I think that worked. And I know some players have fondness for that system, but, you know, there was another philosophy that changed on the team, which was, sometimes there's multiple different ways to look at it. With PvP eye level, it was trying to keep them separate. But then there's another one where it's just like, the game's better if it's elegantly one sort of system, right? Like, why have all these different, you know, complexities of different gear that it's just gaming weird to be like, okay, you go into a PvP map, your eye level increases. It's just arbitrary, right? It's something designers really hate. It's like inelegance, you know, elegance is like really important. But, and so the current version now is like, yeah, there's just one type of gear. There's no special PvP stats or there's no scaling or any of that right now. And so, it's very clean. And I think that has a lot of value. I like that personally, but I understand why players or other developers may want to create a chasm between the two types of gear with resilience or PvP scale, or sorry, of the PvP level. But yeah.
Let's talk about, since you brought it up, 2 topics here. The first one, you mentioned it earlier to me. PvP scaling, and then I want to talk about crit modifiers, and then after that I want to go into the Legion system because I feel like it all kind of melds well together. So Let's talk about PvP scaling because I don't think there was any publication, or is that the word, just any discussion about it being removed, right? Players just noticed it was removed. It was in play, and I remember you had this Twitter post that you put out. I'll never forget it. It was this crazy, like, do you remember what I'm talking about? It was like this MS Paint. I don't know what it was. It was like this little graph going upward trend or something. And it was in play because in Legion. Well, first let's talk about the scaling. So with scaling. It was in the game, and then Rex Troy, maybe you've seen these videos, had all these videos, and players believe that that's why it was removed, was because of his videos. I don't really say that that's true, but because there was so many bugs with the system, like all these weird things that you could do with it, all these unintentional bugs with it. But it was in the game in BFA, and essentially the system prevented you, if you went in there with like subpar gear, you would have a little bit more of a fighting chance for someone that had full gear, right? And then I warned people. I remember I did this all craft thing, and everyone like in that conversation glossed over. I'm like, dude, it's gonna be a rude awakening for a lot of people going from Legion to BFA with scaling, with no resilience in Shadowlands, where it's kind of just it feels free for all. And then I've also noticed that crit isn't the same, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's at 175%. That's what everyone believes. It's at 175% instead of the initial was 200, 150, 175%. So damage is just like, you know, crits are crazy. Combustion in particular, right? Because it always crits. So talk about why PvP scaling, if you know of it, why it was implemented, if you know, and then the conversation about the removal of it, what you know about it, and your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So first, PvP scaling. Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned that tweet. It's like sort of notorious with me now. Yeah, for people who know me, even on the team or whatever, usually that's how a lot of times I communicate. Is I try to like drop a little like diagram of what I'm saying to get, you know, I'm a guild leader and a raid leader, so a lot of times I'll write out the strategies of what we're doing in MS Paint or whatever it is. And so this is what I mean about like what we spoke earlier about being so like open and kind of transparent with your thinking or what your thesis is or what you're trying to do, is that I think I like that. And I think if I was a player back when I was a primary player, I'd like that. But of course, it could be, you know, misinterpreted, or you're not getting the full picture. And, you know, this is why there is community managers, and it's a role and a profession. And that's why, and all of that. And so, but anyways, so what PvP scaling was trying to do was, and what I was trying to say in that image is just that if you think about the power differential in the game from when you first play, let's say in Shadowlands, up to like the third patch or the second patch or how many patches there's going to be, the damage, the power curve can be really steep, right? In Legion, it was really steep, in particular. And I don't, you know, players have short memories, but if you looked at the forums back then, or you know, just played the game, leveled on alt, kind of where this came from is I think a developer, a programmer came into our office just like, I was just leveling on a PvP server and some Moonkin killed me with a starfall accidentally while I was, you know, doing quests. It's like, what's going on with the damage or whatever, right? And the thing is, it's not the Moonkin's fault or it's whatever. It's just that the power curve going from when you first starting a character to at the end of expansion is so high. It's like I don't know what it is, probably 300% or something like that.
Your HP and triples. So, it triples. Yeah, it's like a different expansion, right? In one expansion.
Yeah. And so it's so high. And so the question is, what do you do about that, right? And there's many different solutions throughout the years that we've tried. One is resilience on gear that kind of dampens some of the damage curve, right? It reduces player damage. Pros of resilience is it's cool to have a stat. It's cool to have a PvP stat. It feels cool. It makes the gear feel unique. It makes PvP gear feel like a thing. Downside of resilience is if you don't have resilience gear, you're screwed. And if you don't know about resilience gear, you're screwed. And if you are first starting out and say, you know, I want to get PvP gear. How do I get PvP gear? Well, you PvP. Well, have fun getting two-shot for a week or two to get some resilience gear, right? Which would be a lot of the team members sort of thing coming to our office being like, so I get blown up in PvP. What's going on? And I'm like, well, get resilience gear. Well, how do you get it? We'll do battlegrounds. Well, I'm just going to get womboed, and that's not fun. And it's true. It's really not fun. And so that's one solution we've done in the past. The other one is PvP eye level. Again, I think you probably even need PvP gear to do that, right? To activate that. So that has its own share of problems. Another one is, when you zone into the battleground, your eye level gets increased or whatever, right? Could work in the battleground, but what about in the open world?
That was WAD, right? That was the WAD system, I think.
Yeah. And so that has its share of problems. And so you can see the sort of mind map here of how we got to say PvP scaling, or the templates. Templates is another solution sort of deal, right? That we used in the past in Legion. And so all these have their pros and cons. What we liked about the scaling system is just that it's sort of in the background. It's sort of, you don't have to get farm gear to turn it on. You don't have to, it's not moving your eye levels up and down necessarily on your paper doll or any of that. It's active not just in battlegrounds and arenas, but in the open world. And so the goal with it was just that it'd be so kind of in the background and so, or whatever, that you wouldn't have to kind of worry about it. And if you think about all the different PvP encounters in the game, it's probably millions per day of players fighting each other. And generally, I think on most encounters, you would never even think that it's even there. It's just the game just feels natural, like it's just working. Certainly, though, for the enthusiast player, the hardcore player, they are going to realize that it exists and that it may be not working out as intended sometimes. And all of the kind of problems with the system were like sort of bugs, or a lot of times, there's this one case I think with Venruki. He like got ganked by some moonkin or something, and he got destroyed. And he was like, "This is the scaling system." But what we actually looked into it, we created a whole simulation of that entire encounter, like millisecond by millisecond, and it wasn't the scaling system. It was just that the moonkin had a really, really overpowered trinket that we eventually nerfed. And so it was a red herring, right, with the scaling system. And so that's what I was trying to say in the sort of image. It's just like, this is what the scaling system is trying to do. And that a lot of the anxiety around it is sort of unfounded, because a lot of it was just bugs with other things, or it's just a lot of red herrings. And so the scaling system just sort of gotten beat up about a lot of these sort of other issues. There were some legitimate issues with the scaling system. There was like an issue with like gems had higher value than they're intended, just because they were never squished with the level squish or something like that. So that was something we hot fixed, right? But I think a lot of the issues with the scaling system, honestly, is just that if we would have had the opportunity to talk about it openly with the players, I think it wouldn't have been as the reaction wouldn't have been as negative. But of course, I didn't really get the chance to do that, and we never really did a blog post or anything, just because it's such a hot button issue that I think the developers are just like, I don't want to talk about it. They're just going to get worked up about it. And I think kind of probably the philosophy of which I kind of support anyways with Shadowlands, it's just like, maybe let's turn it off for now until we think about how to address some of the players' concerns, which I think there are some legitimate concerns. One is just it's not transparent enough.
Right.
I could imagine in the combat log, it could say like, okay, this damage was reduced by this because of the scaling, or something, some way to test it and to know how it's really working.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, really its goals is just to say, here's a high eye level player, here's a low eye level player. Let's kind of make it a little more fair experience and just kind of reduce the differential, the power difference between the player. So instead of it being 3x, maybe it's 1x or 2x or whatever we feel comfortable with it being, right? Which is kind of like how the power curve used to be in the past expansions. If you think about Lich King probably was like, I don't know, probably a 30-45% damage difference between when he first started to the end game, right? I think that's a healthy power curve, but like 4 or 5x, whatever it is, that's like, dude, that's too much. You know what I mean?
It's so insane.
And so
man.
The question is like, I know there's a lot of players and I'm sympathetic with this. It's just like, I want to live in an MMO and a WoW where there's no need for a scaling system. And I'm like, well, yeah, I would love that too. But the thing is with a game is just in the modern game is that they have a lot of patches within an expansion cycle, and where your power, there's so many vectors of power. There's Azerite, there's the artifact, there is conduits or whatever they are, right? Legendaries. These all add up to a large power curve. And so the other solution, which could be viable, is, hey, don't make such a big power curve in the expansion. But it's unlikely to happen with how the modern game works these days. They're not going to really reduce the power curve, because if they do that, they're reducing how much like rewards they can give. And if they reduce how many rewards they can give, yada yada yada, it waterfalls down, right? So yeah, the modern game is a lot more complicated. There's a lot more rewards. There's a lot more vectors of power. There's a bigger power difference between the first patch to the last patch. And so the question is, what do you do about that?
Yeah.
You know, I talked about many different solutions you could do here. The resilience, you could do PvP at eye level, you could do some sort of template system or whatever. They all have their pros and cons. The scaling system also has pros and cons, but I think we keep moving from one system to another without kind of working on one of them to iron out kind of the issues. And so I would just say choose one of these. It doesn't have to be the scaling system, could be other ones. Maybe it's none of them. Maybe you just say, fuck it. Let's just have this huge power curve. This is what we're at.
Yeah.
Do that if you want, but hold true to that and be content with that's what the game is, right?
Yeah.
Because the team and the players, I don't think were comfortable where it was at the end of, say, Legion or whatever, where they're just dying from AoE damage accidentally from other players while leveling. Like, who wants to be on a PvP server at that point? And what we saw was a lot of players were moving off the PvP servers because of that experience. Like, who wants to level up and just die in two hits from somebody?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you say that, because in the Legion system, for me, at least the instance experience, I thought was pretty good. I felt like, for me, I prefer both. Yeah. I like the template system because the trinkets were disabled, legendaries were it was just the game. So it felt like a lot of the stuff that bogs down the game in these recent expansions just didn't exist, right? And it was very easy to tune. It was a huge separation between the two communities, which again, I do both, right? But I feel like it was easier to bounce. They just turned these little knobs here and there, and they still kind of do that today, but it just felt like the separation of them allowed for but I get the open world experience. You know, I'm someone that hates the leveling experience in World of Warcraft. I just never enjoy it. I liked Classic because it was a little more challenging, and, you know, I'm broke. I'm like some butt naked orc running through the barrens, like trying to, you know, gather what I can. But in the modern game, I can't stand it. No matter what you do, I don't read the quests. I'm collecting these things. It's always collect, and not the biggest fan. So I just want to get through it. But I know some people will enjoy that, and that's just my personal take.
Yeah,
on
it. I always remember, you know, Wreckful, who you know, he was like the first streamer I ever watched, I think, and of course he was a hardcore PvPer as well, arena player, all that. And I always remember his story, how he hated leveling in WoW, and he actually tried it and then dropped it because he didn't like leveling. He didn't like, you know, progressing in the way that the game did. But then he shared some friend's account who was already leveled up, and he did arena, and that's where he really fell in love with the game, right? And so that's something that I'm always mindful of, is just, of course, there's a certain type of player who wants to play WoW for a certain type of thing, which may be PvP or arena or things like that. WoW is a game that attracts many different players who have many different sort of experiences that they like, that we try to support. But yeah, and I know that when players give feedback about, well, I like scaling, or I like templates, or I like PvP gearing being separate in its own thing. I get that, but the question for the team is always, you know, what is the vision? Is it really to have all these different types of players who have their own siloed off different games within a game, or is it supposed to be one unique holistic experience, right?
Gotcha.
And so I think there's an argument for both. It's just a question of which, you know, and the game shifts back and forth between those constantly, which can be maddening for players, because they're like, I was playing this game that had this sort of vision and this sort of experience, and now it's changed, you know, and that sucks. And so, and it's also hard to know what the vision of the game is at any given moment. And so, and that shifts constantly as well. And, but yeah, so I'm really sympathetic with that type of player, and it's interesting always to me that, you know, if you look at a lot of the kind of social impact that the game has, or sort of, I mean, the virability of different aspects of the game, the PvP community is always really kind of the red hot one. Like, if you look at the streamers who stream WoW, it's always the PvP peers, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think there is a sort of underserved market for the WoW PvP or gamer that WoW sort of kind of tiptoes around, right? So
it's interesting as you talk about all this stuff. I have a couple more things here, and then, you know, I can wrap you up. But you mentioned so many things that I have here. It's very funny because it's good though. Actually, for me, it sucks that you don't work there anymore. But, you know, it's nice that you talk about all these things. It's I think it's just good to hear from you know. let's talk about this topic, and I've got a couple more. I want to talk about RBGs and then one other topic here. Um, this thing in particular, you mentioned it, and you talk about the game constantly changing and its vision. I think players, now that you say that, I think that's what I experience, right? Because it's always just, well, I feel like Blizzard does this a lot, right? Where they have this really great thing going on, and then they drop it for something else, or they have a system that they started and then they just leave it to I can give you a ton of the honor system, for example. In Legion, they try to do something with it, and then it's just been very, I mean, now I don't even know what it is anymore. They tried to make this prestige system. They said, okay, that doesn't work. And then they have this honor system, which I love the idea of an honor system because it brings together all of the PvP, right? The world PvP comes into play, your RBGs come into play, your BGs, everything that you do PvP is working towards a system. And it almost I always mention like a battle pass system where you're constantly like you log in the game and you're trying to work towards this next reward that's there. But the rewards now are just way too far in between. It's like my next thing is 50 honor levels for a crab pet, and that's not like something that I'm going to be stoked about logging on to do. It's a little crab with a sword and shield. So but I want to talk about this in particular. So in particular, I want to talk about PvP being this red hot thing. Does Blizzard, or do you know if there's I feel like it's such a crazy market, like this MMO style PvP genre. It doesn't exist anywhere else. You have like and Mythic Plus to be a little bit, and dungeon, but those types of things. MMO style PvP doesn't exist anywhere else. There's no genre. There's battle royales. You have all these other games, but a game where you have all these classes, you invest a little bit of time on something, you have all these abilities. There's different map modes. You have a capture the flag, and it goes beyond just Overwatch or Call of Duty. It has all of these different modes that you can do with these in-depth classes with items and gear. That doesn't exist anywhere else. And I feel like WoW has that whole market, right? There's no game that even comes close to it, and I've tried every MMO. I'm always looking for the next one. You're like, what's going to be fun to play? Not because I want this one to go away, but because I'm looking for that experience. And it doesn't exist. And I feel like as someone, for me, maybe this is just my own view in the world and the game, but they have this whole thing. It's so amazing if they were to really, because I heard you talk about WoW is more of a PvE game nowadays, but when you started, it was different. The directors you were working with and the people you were working with, the developers at the time, were different viewpoints on the game, and it changes so much. Are they aware of this? Like this style of game that players love so much, that's all they want to do. Wreckful, as an example, it's what he loves. It doesn't exist anywhere else, and they have that market, and there could be a lot of potential there. Or do they just see it as it is what it is, it's just a game mode that we have in the game that players enjoy? Because there's no other game like that, right? Every game has so much competition. MOBAs, FPS. WoW is the only one like that.
Yeah, it's always surprised me. I was always waiting for something. You've seen some sort of games in this space. Gosh, it was like a top-down arena style.
Battle Right? Was that what it was?
Battle Right. Yeah. Battle Right has some cool stuff. But it's really interesting that there's really nothing quite like this sort of experience in WoW. There's a lot to it. It's a very esoteric, sort of complicated design to try to hammer out. And there's a lot of magic in it too, like the WoW combat system, even though it's old and
it's so polished,
things like that. But it feels really good to play. They do a really good job of getting the direct control well, the animations, the validation of abilities and
it's the best for 100%
timing, netcode, that sort of thing. It's not simple to do that, and so that's, I think, probably kind of why you don't see a lot of good players here. It's really interesting. Is it a value on the team? To be perfectly honest, probably not. And the reason why is just because the team is there are a lot of, like, say, PvP. There's a decent number of PvPers on the team, people who love the experience, who understand deeply why it resonates with players, and why it's so sticky and interesting, it has depth and things like that. So there are advocates for it, but not as much. And really what the team was born out of, what the WoW team came from, was from, you know, EverQuest and MUDs and tabletop RPGs, that sort of experience, right? And so a lot of the team's talent came from was more focused on that sort of experience, like maybe more like storytelling um, or dungeoneering or raiding, that sort of thing, which the game does well.
Yeah, it's good.
But yeah, PvP is always sort of kind of a smaller feature to the game. Um, that, you know, it had some advocates like Alan Adham, who was one of the early founders. I don't know if it's true, but I think he was one of the big advocates to have PvP in the game and to have factions that were hostile to each other. And Tom Chilton, who is one of the early game directors who came from Ultima, and Ultima, as you know, has
Yeah.
world PvP and, you know, cool. You could loot players and all that sort of thing. So it's had its advocates. I would always say, you know, I was probably one of the prime people who felt like it was an underserved sort of player, and I always felt like, you know, in the beginning of an expansion cycle, I have all these ideas that I would like to do, and like battlegrounds or a different experience or some other system and things like that. And the way that it works is just that there's so much production budget that you get to do for its expansion. And so, you know, I always felt like Cinderella, where it's just like I'm in this dress of like all this like dream that I want to have here with all these things. And then all the stepsisters come and rip all my tasks away, and like, I need that budget for my thing. And then I'm left in tatters at the end, just like, well, I guess
No, don't say that to me.
I have
No.
like the Bastion Arena here, and that's the only thing I have going for Shadowlands PvP, really. You know, it's just,
Wow.
it's not because they don't think it's it has value or anything. It's just that there's other things that are probably more important to a larger percent of the player base, right? And what's sad is it's kind of a chicken egg thing, right? You know, is the PvP player base really that small, or is it just because they aren't given content and things to grow it, right?
Yeah.
And that's always a debate on the team. It's just like, well, is it worth investing all this time into uh, a WoW arena thing, or balancing the game for arena or all of that? Because isn't that player base sort of small, you know? But it's like, well, it would be bigger if you just invested time into it,
Right.
right?
The garden
Um,
grows where you water it, right? Like that's wherever, like that's where it grows. If you don't put anything, I mean, I will say, you can keep going. I just want to cut you off, but I bet you PvP is way higher than it's ever been because of the vendor system. I bet you, like, if we could find the stats, I would be shocked. There's so many groups now, people doing PvP. Streams are higher, viewership on videos are higher because ever than before, because there's stuff that you get something from it. There's some investment. Oh, I'm getting something out of this. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm not shocked
Yeah.
by
What's
that.
interesting is, even though you know, the pitch that I had for the PvP gearing system for BFA wasn't fully realized, there was a big chunk of it that didn't go in, which had to do with a vendor and deterministic sort of layer to it that they didn't want to do at the time, but they did that in Shadowlands, of course. But there was a lot of improvement with, I felt, the gearing system in BFA. You know, we had the ranks where different, like, you unlock the cosmetics instantly, you get the mount when you're gladiator instantly, you don't have to wait for the end of season calculation, yada yada yada. So there's we improved a lot on the progression system there. And actually the concurrency of PvPers in BFA was a lot higher. And I think we were kind of the PvP team, which is like really kind of a team of 3 people, kind of was the team that grew them, or had the best results of the different features and things in the expansion. Of course, there's a lot of challenges with, like, say, islands and warfronts and whatnot, but we were performing better than those systems were in terms of like player engagement. And so,
Yeah,
um,
warfronts are epic BGs versus bots. Like that's what I always
yeah,
say. Like that's what they are. They're epic battlegrounds versus bots. I mean, it's like I don't know. I
yeah,
never understood that. I just couldn't get
yeah.
behind. I don't know.
Don't get me started on the warfronts, because that's a whole other, yeah,
Yeah,
3 hours. But
yeah,
anyways,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so I fully resonate that I feel like the WoW PvPer is the underserved type of player on the in the game.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the best way to sort of um yeah, I don't know the best way really to kind of add. I think just doing things that you're doing and making it clear. And I think like you mentioned, some of the other PvEers who are getting into PvP, and I've heard from a lot of people who are like haven't PvP'd in a while, but are doing it just to get that tick on their sort of box. And they've been actually PvP has been the most fun thing for them this expansion.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, good, And so I think getting the progression system to be viable and to be competitive with PvE is the sort of Trojan horse to get more PvPers out there, right? Because I always had this wrestling with the atomization team on WoW, just like the eye levels for PvP and the rewards are just not anywhere near the PvE rewards, right? And because a lot of times they'd be like, well, you get 5 artifact power per arena match. I'm like, that's nothing. It's like they don't understand that you're waiting in queue a while, and the matches are really rough. It's like it's not like PvE where I get better gear and I just blow through it. PvP is always going to be nail biting the first arena to the last one, and so it doesn't get any easier. And so anyways, there's a lot of reasons for these things. Sure. But yeah,
I do want to add as well that a lot of people don't know this, but I know that you pushed me to provide specifics about what could go better with the system as well. And the reason why I made a lot of those videos was because of because I was complaining to you. I was complaining to you.
Well, my dirty secret a lot of times is just I would get the influencers riled up about changes that I wanted to make internally, and then once they come out publicly with them, then I send them to the other developers to convince them. I'm like, look, see, this is what I was saying, right?
Yeah. And I thought I was complaining to you, and you told me to provide some evidence. So when I did that,
I mean, your video did have an impact, right? And so,
all right, 2 last things. One big topic that you like. I know I'm taking up so much of your time, but I have to ask you these 2 things if you don't mind. They're pretty big.
Yeah,
I'll let you go. RBGs, okay?
Yeah.
I know this is one of the things that you like. I've heard you talk about it a few times. I know you're more casual, but you're into RBGs. So we're going to talk about that, and then I have one last thing. So RBGs, for me, is a system. I like RBGs, okay? Not my forte, because you need 10 people. I think it's a little too hard to get 10 people going, okay, for an RBG, because it's not like a raid where people are invested. They can leave after 1 game. You have to reform. If you have a team, that's great, but finding a team of 10 people with the barriers, which we'll talk about in the next topic. Love RBGs, though, because I think it has much more potential than Arena, in my opinion. Arena players are going to hate me for saying that. But all I do is Arena. But I've been doing more RBGs now because there's incentive. You get tons of honor from doing it. It's amazing for ults. Helps me fill up my vault much faster. So there's reason to do it. You get more conquest. And I like objectives. I like objectives because it allows classes to shine that aren't so meta, right? Like, you're going to have a meta in RBGs, but just having stealth alone, let's say Sub-Rogue isn't doing the most damage because it got nerfed. It's still an insane class in RBGs because they can sit at a point, spam sap, not allow them to cap, can tell people, hey, someone's here. They can float, ninja bases, amazing, right? Gives your class shines more than just how much damage you're doing, right? Monks, for example, Ring of Peace, amazing for BGs. I know the meta is shifting towards more like Disc Priests and Paladins, but in general, Mistweavers were always really good at RBGs, at least in BFA, they were good. RBGs, no, that's your thing. I could be wrong there, but one of your things. I feel like it's a system that's super forgotten. No real rank 1 title, same title every season, right? Hero of the Horde, Hero of the Alliance, not, corrupted warlord or sinful warlord or demonic warlord, right? They could have gotten those titles that were unique. They have the same title. No mount that you get from being at the top from it. No unique progression that's separate from Arena. And it feels like the MMR system, this is my biggest gripe with the system, is that because it's 10v10, you could have 500 players doing RBGs. What is that, 50 teams? Right? When if you have 500 Arena players, that's way more teams. So you have this nice spread in MMR. When you have these 10s, every game, I can't even chill and have fun in RBGs because I'll do them. If I want to take them seriously, I'll win one game, I'm 1600, then 1800, then I'm 2K if I win 2 in a row. And then I win one more, I'm fighting the best team on the ladder, 2400 plus 20, whatever. And those people are getting points off of me. You know, they're winning games and getting points off of me. So it's so hard to take it seriously. Although I'm not saying those players aren't skilled. I'm not saying they're not really good. I'm not saying Arena is more important than RBGs. I think they're equal. But I think it's hard to take RBGs as seriously when that system needs a lot of incentive. I think that system it's got good incentive, but I think it needs more. And I think it needs some repairing in the MMR, like, the brackets don't make any sense. You know, how do you jump 300 MMR, you know, from one win in Arena? I'm lucky if I jump, 50 MMR, you know, and that would make more sense. So many mismatches there. And I do think 10v10 is a little, although I love it and it makes sense, it just seems like it's too hard to get a group going.
Logistics, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So thoughts about it, and was there anything that you really tried to push for RBGs that you wanted to see have happen, I guess?
Yeah. So I mean, I do really, I have a soft spot for RBGs, and it's has to do partially because it's another underserved sort of audience there that I think doesn't get a lot of love, especially compared to Arena, right? Certainly I do love Arena also for different reasons, but yeah, I kind of have a soft spot for RPGs also just because Battlegrounds and WoW was something that I really loved in Classic. My guild, there was no arenas at the time, of course, in Classic, so we couldn't even do that if we wanted to. But we were like undefeated in Warsong on Tychondrius at the time in our guild on the Lions side, and I was like the flag runner druid, and it was exciting, and we had like really great team of people that would coordinate, and yes, it's a team of 10, which is different than a team of 3, but the more the better a lot of times with in an MMO and in a group community kind of setting, right? It was cool to have a team of healers that work together. That's different than, say, an Arena where you're the only healer, right? It's objective based, which can be kind of fun and interesting dynamic than Arena, which is really, yes, there's strategy and tactics in Arena, and that's what the secret of the gameplay is. But it can sometimes feel as like a DPS test or like a class balance test or something sometimes, right? When it doesn't go well. Whereas BGs, the objectives really kind of add a lot of color to the experience. So yeah, the background was just that we would do this whole thing. There was no RBG system in Classic, but what we would do is we would have a 10-man group, and then we would coordinate with the Horde on the other side and say, okay, queue up, and then we would match, try to get each other. And then it would be like, a sweaty experience where we had flask and all these potions, and I had, or reflectors and all this other stuff. And it was just a lot of fun. And I always thought, this is an underserved audience here experience. And I was kind of disappointed when they did Arena rather than rated BGs. And so, when I joined Blizzard, I had a whole pitch for the system. At the time, it was going to be like a guild system, like a guild battleground system, because I was all about guilds at the time. But of course, if you're going to do a guild system, maybe you have players that aren't in your guild or whatever. And so instead, it was more of a team-based system, separate from guilds. But anyways, and so yeah, I think RBGs is a really great experience, and I do agree. There's a lot of like, why is it that it's hard to put together a team, or why is it that there's not, you jump MMR like that because there's like a bootstrap of MMR that boosts you when you win or lose, essentially. And the reason why it's there is just because the player base usually is sort of lower in RBGs than it is in Arena. And so a lot of the issues that it has is because the total player pool is sort of low, or kind of lower than what we'd want, probably, right? It increased like a lot in BFA, actually. It was really nice to see. And I don't know what the numbers are now, but
it's probably ridiculous, because I look at the teams and it's nowhere near what was in BFA. I could scroll. I'm looking like, wow. Exactly. It was like 1 in the morning. I'm like, dude, there's no way there's an RBG group. I need some more honor. And my friend's like, are you kidding me, dude? Open it up. And I'm like, oh my God, people love RBGs right now.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so a lot of the issues come from just sort of it doesn't have the critical mass of players, and it's not so much that maybe even RPGs are a bad experience. It's just that WoW is a big game with many different things to do, and it's hard to have an audience for something like RPG. Like compare it to Overwatch. What do you do in Overwatch?
It's
You
only
queue
Overwatch,
for 5v5 matches, and that's all you do. So they have a critical mass of players. You know, if they're playing Overwatch, they're someone that you can probably queue with. If they're playing WoW, well, they may be doing Torghast. They may be doing like farming transmog gear. They may be doing a quest. They may be whatever, right? And so you're splitting the player base many different times. So that's part of the problem with RPGs as well. You know, so yeah, we could add more title. They could add more titles or mounts or things like that. That would be cool. I support that fully. You know, the reason why they don't do it is not so much that they don't like RPGs or whatever, it's just that there's only so many mounts they could do or so many art budget they have, and so it's hard to justify putting it to RPGs or whatever, right? The chicken egg thing,
right?
Again, right? Anyways, but you know, I question whether a lot of the engagement isn't there just because it doesn't have a mount or title. It's probably RPGs are daunting to get into, and there's a lot to learn. And you know, I think a lot of players are scared to queue and join a group just because they don't want to be told they suck and things like that. So there's a lot of different reasons for it. All things I think the team should think about and try to improve on. And you know, they are, and I think there's a lot of room for growth there. But yeah, that's kind of my general thoughts about it.
Was there anything in particular that you've pitched about RBGs that you wanted to see?
Well, I'm sort of like don't want to say because they could still do it. You know, I don't want to like.
Okay.
But generally, I think the things that they could do to improve the experience is improve the group finder. Not say solo queue, join a group, but instead the lobby sort of experience. It's just kind of bare bones.
Sure.
But there's a lot of room for growth there as well. Linking your achievements is kind of a crappy experience. That could be improved, right?
Yeah, this is a great segue. So this is my last topic.
Yeah.
And this is something that for the longest time, I was like, the game really needs it, right? And then there was a point where then in BFA, I'm like, all right, dude, there's so many other things wrong with the PvP system that I don't care about this anymore, right? But then now again, I'm experiencing it once again in myself, but also just what I hear from the community. And this is solo rated PvP content, and we'll talk about this because I think this might be something that me and you disagree on. So maybe because from what the sense I get from you that you're big into community aspects and you don't want to like lose the MMO aspect of it. So I'll give you my thoughts on it, and then we can have a little quick discussion about it, and we'll wrap it up here. It's the last question I have for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I've noticed in World of Warcraft, okay, as a player that plays every day, okay, is that the first 2 weeks of the expansion are by far the best. People always ask me, you know, my streams or whatever, my friends, hey man, like, should I wait to buy the game or I'm like, no, you just buy it right away. Because no matter what, the first 2 weeks are the best. You miss out on it because there's no barriers. Everyone's doing regular battlegrounds. Everyone's doing skirmishes, quests, normal dungeons, heroic dungeons. Maybe you're doing your mythic zeros, but you're capped. There's no mythic raiding. There's no heroic raid. It's just everyone's included, right? Open to anybody. But then what happens is the game starts, right? Then a rated arena starts. Then Mythic Plus starts. Then Mythic raiding starts. And all these things start happening in the game. And that's when I've noticed that, yeah, man, there might be an influx, but I hear it. You know, my friends are quitting. I can't find anyone to play with, man, because that's the end game content, right? Eventually you do Torghast, you do the little world quest, which by the way, I don't think most people buy the game to do world quests, in my opinion. I think that's something that they just do to fill time, but I don't think anyone's like, I can't wait to do some world quests this expansion. They're there to do the badass stuff, right? Like the stuff that like, at least in modern gaming, I feel like, you know, you might have an older audience that just enjoys this wholesome experience, but I think a lot of the younger audience looks to do this challenging content, right? Like they want to do these like cooled raids and these dungeons, and they want to push high. Like that's that's the trend in gaming, I believe, at least, you know, is this competitive aspect to it, you know. But World of Warcraft, in my opinion, is the only game that I can think of where you need a group to do anything that's end game, right? You need a group for everything. I don't consider Torghast end game, you know. I just consider it as like some filler progression system. I don't consider the game to be based around Torghast, although they might try to with Twisting Corridors. I think people look, when they look at guides, when they go on YouTube, when they're trying to learn, this newer audience, right, is that they want to do end game content. But in order to do that, you know, it's kind of like, I give this example. It's kind of like you want to play Guitar Hero, right? And you want to learn how to play the guitar. So maybe Rogue, for example. But in order to learn that guitar, you got to find a band first. So you need to find someone that wants to play the bass, the drum, you know, the drummer, the vocalist, and in order to play guitar, it's Guitar Hero, you need the band first. But in most scenarios, you'd learn how to play the guitar first, and then you'd go look for a band, right? You would never like try to find a band before you know how to play an instrument. And I think that is the case for a lot of people when it comes to Arena. I think it's for Mythic Plus as well. And a lot of people can't even really improve because they get this experience, right, where they sit in LFG for 3 hours. The average guy might come home from work, has 3 to 4 hours to play per night. Maybe he spends most of his time in LFG, and then he gets in a group, and then some dude says you suck. He leaves after a couple games, and then you're back to waiting again. And then I know the concern is that maybe, well, it's toxic because, you know, you might be in a group, and then it's just this random person who could just throw the game. But that exists in every game as well. And it's kind of like, what's worse? You have an experience with some random person that he may be toxic, and then whatever, like an Overwatch, or you spend time really trying to play, and then you're not playing, and then you finally get in a group, you get in this Discord thing, you like share your little Tinder profile in LFG where you tell them all your interests and likes, and then they swipe yes or no, and then maybe they get the right one, and then you match up, and then they leave anyway after 2 games, and you're back to sitting again, and then you can't progress. And most people I've found love when I do viewer games, and that's the thing on Twitch too, is that everyone's just sitting there waiting. And as a streamer or a rank 1 player, they don't have this problem. They have this huge buddies list of like teams to play with, people that are grandfathered in the community, but there's all these new players that don't share that experience. You look at the game and it doesn't look like what when you play it. Like when you see YouTube videos, oh, I want to do this, I want to get in this high-end PvP stuff. You can't. Other games, if you want to play League all day, if you want to play Fortnite, if you want to play Hearthstone, whatever the game is, you can spam it all day to improve. All day. There's no barrier to entry. The only barrier is you getting better. And WoW, the barrier is actually playing the game, and then you can try to get better. And I feel like that's the biggest issue with Mythic Plus. And that's the end game, in my opinion, is that those are the things you can spam all day. That's what keeps people addicted to video games and wanting to play, is that you can just do it all day. And WoW, a lot of people are like, I don't know what to do. And I have a friend that just told me the same thing. He's like, I hate that everything requires a group because I don't mind looking, but sometimes I just want to do the damn content and I don't want to spend time. I'll just go play another game. And I feel like that's WoW's biggest flaw, is that it doesn't have an option for that, whether it be RBGs, whether it be Arena. Obviously, comps and things won't make sense, but it gives them the opportunity to start playing in a competitive sense rather than just doing skirmishes all day, which is just mismatches all over the place, and there's no really rewards behind it. RBGs, you need a group. Random Battlegrounds, still no progression behind it. So I know we were really close in Legion. Halinka talked about it a lot. He had a few interviews, and he was saying, like, oh, I know it would help. We have to figure out, we're not opposed to it yet, but we just don't know how it would work, and it would take some time. Why have we not seen that in the game? And do you think that the team doesn't see that issue existing in the game? Do they not know that people don't really get to experience the best parts of World of Warcraft because of just this LFG system, which is super outdated as well?
Right.
There's my pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a really complicated question, and something that I have a very contrarian view on, that probably a lot of other game directors or studios or people probably wouldn't agree with, or maybe they have other different thoughts, right? There's all these different views. Sure. But why hasn't it ever been added to WoW? You know, it still could be. I don't know necessarily. There are some challenges there. There's a lot of different challenges for WoW specifically, because the magic of Arena is about building a comp. It's about having strengths. There's WoW classes at their best have very distinct strengths and weaknesses, and a composition is really kind of a celebration of that sort of design of building your team around a certain certain sort of strength, right?
Sure.
And so if you would do, it's not as easy as, say, Counter-Strike or something like that, where you just take people who have similar MMRs and put them into a match, because everyone, you don't have to worry about building any sort of composition, right? In Overwatch, they solve this issue by
locking in prior, right?
Yeah, you do not go in as Mercy. You do not go in as certain classes. I think at some point they added role queue,
right?
Which was a way to kind of compromise here, because there was a lot of toxicity and issues about people fighting over roles and things like that. And so it's there's no sort of like best way to do this, and there's pros and cons to all of them. I think for WoW, it makes a lot of sense for it actually to not be a solo queue system because of those composition reasons. And then also, from my view, philosophically, is I think toxicity is a huge sort of challenge in games today. Riot, there's like a whole, like, I think toxicity sort of like cross studio initiative, and much money is put into this for research and all this other stuff. Different studios have different answers, like Riot tried doing a whole tribunal system where you have like a judge and jury of players who tell the player, hey, you're toxic and you're suspended or whatever, right? And so it's it's complicated sort of challenge to have, because it's essentially, these are human problems, or these are all humans here who have their own complicated social reasons why they're toxic to each other or not. But I would say toxicity does breed from game design, and so it's the designers, developers are responsible for the sort of game that they create. And so a lot of toxicity comes in Overwatch or League or Dota or any kind of match-made game, because you're putting players who have you're putting players together who have a similar MMR, let's say, and the reward they're trying to get is they're trying to increase their MMR so they can get a higher rank to get some new reward, right? And that's kind of the standard progression system in competitive games today. The challenge with that is, if it's a team-based game, one player may be having an off day, or he may be distracted, or he may have rust or something like that. And so he may be he or she may be underperforming, and suddenly now the other players are blaming him, or maybe it's not even has to do with like anything legitimate. It's just someone's whatever reason, right? And so the players are sort of fighting each other here, because they really want to get that extra rank, and the game is saying, hey, if you want it, your team needs to perform. Well, your team is random bunch of people you've never met before. It maybe not have a cultural fit with, or same sort of goals or whatever. And that's where a lot of this toxicity comes from, right? And so WoW doesn't really have this problem, at least in Arena and RBGs, usually, because there's a set leader creating the group, and he kind of curates the group, or he or she.
See, but I would disagree. Kind of avoids... I would disagree. I feel like the game already has that. I feel like I've been in tons of groups, where it's like it just sucks. Like the guy just is like, I get in. My friend Ann Bonnie, dude, this is a great story. Do you know who Ann Bonnie is?
I've heard the name. I think yeah.
There's a giant meme, by the way, which is hilarious, because people ask, do you know who Ann Bonnie is, and people say no. So I'm sure he's gonna love this, because you're like, I think I'm. So Ann Bonnie. I hope he sees this part. I'm gonna have to tell him. So Ann Bonnie had when he was in a group, okay, and he signed up the other day, and it was LFG. He just wanted to play some games. He spent 30 minutes trying to get into a group, 40 minutes. He gets into a group. He gets in there, and the guy, he's like, oh, that's not the real Ann Bonnie. He's fake. He only has duelist experience. I don't want to play with him. Right when he joins the group, right? And this happens all the time for a lot of people. And then they get in call and these two guys are yelling at each other like, I'm not playing with this fucking guy, and then he's like, oh, it's really him, okay, let's play. And then he's like, listen man, you're playing with the two of the best players in the world. They're both like 2K at the time, and they're just yelling at each other, and they all leave the call, and Bonnie, he invites me to the call to listen. It's like, you have to listen to this, and I'm just sitting there listening, and the point is like, I feel like that already exists, and it's like, what do you weigh out more toxic? Like getting those experiences that you try to really hard to make happen, like you try to play, like you're spending the work and you still have a bad experience, or at least you know, okay, well, I'm never gonna see that guy again. I could just not queue it, like that's it, right? Like I'm not gonna play, and it's an option, right? I think ultimately, don't you think giving people the option to say, you know what, you don't have to spend your whole day trying to find something. And what, in my opinion, isn't it a better way to find people to, oh, that guy was really cool to play with. He plays a good mage. I have a rogue. Maybe me and you can play some. You find out by playing together. It's like speed dating. You go out and you try something out and it works out great. Let me add you, right? Like you add them because you're worried you're never going to see them again. So at least you're meeting people by playing as a separate bracket. Maybe not as serious. Maybe it's just for fun. Like maybe you wouldn't really see it as like the most competitive thing because there's not pre-made comps, but you can grab people that you've met and then make a pre-made comp, you know, rather than spending all of your time trying to find something that could equally be toxic, right? You know, my thought process on it now is I get it, but I feel like not giving people the option to do that because you're worried about things being toxic, when generally it's like you could have that could happen anywhere. It happens in pug raids with the raid leader in all caps and raid warnings, you guys all suck, like I'm gonna boot the next person that It's not like it's not like when you make your own group it's this magical experience every time. In fact, it's, you know, it's not.
Oh, I'm not saying right. I'm not saying this is the system exists today is zero toxicity. Of course there is going to be some. My view is just that if you would make it solo queue, the toxicity would be much higher. And so, but you know, it's really complicated too, because it's not so much that it's solo queue rated, it's just solo queue rated where the rewards have to do with your MMR. Right. I think the way we think about MMR today is just that for players, it's a sort of journey that they start as bronze or wood league and become diamond, and that everybody has this experience. But the data shows us that that's not accurate. Actually, based on people's, whoever they are and their different skill sets, you're going to have a player who is a silver player and they're always going to be a silver player. And so what kind of season journey or sort of competitive experience does that player have? They're going to get to silver, stay there for a while, and never feel like they're progressing. Right. And so I think the system feels best for really the pro players who probably could be competitive, like top 1%, because it feels like a journey for them going through the different ranks. And it feels great I'm go from bronze to silver to gold, etc. Right. And we're moving into this era today where, you know, AI can tell you what your MMR is within 30 seconds of watching you play. And so after that's the case in games, what is the progression experience? Because it will tell you if you're a diamond player within 30 seconds of watching you. You know, you like to think, oh my God, no, that's not true. You know, I improve every day. Well, that's not true. It's the reason why it feels like a progression is because all the players are starting off in the beginning of season at once, and the system is still trying to figure out what well, I mean, first of all, we don't utilize these systems yet saying WoW, but it's sort of the future. But my point is just that we shouldn't get so hogtied or so comfortable with MMR being really the content, the progression system of the game, right? Something I really like about PUBG and Battle Royales is just that the MMR in that game isn't really so important because there's so many different factors of winning a match in, say, PUBG or Apex or whatever. It has to do with a multitude of different factors that happen in the match. And so even for a low ranked player who is like a wood league player or a silver player, you could feel like you really beat the game or achieve something that, you know, diamond WoW players like gladiators and WoW feel like. And that's getting like, you know, winning the Battle Royale match at the end, the chicken dinners or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so WoW doesn't really have a sort of reward for the average skilled player. Like, you know, if you're talking about the distribution curve of ranks, probably someone in silver to gold or whatever, there's no sort of like real ultimate sort of reward for that type of player, because their MMR, their skill ceiling that they're able to achieve as humans, they can't really control that. Similar situation of me playing in the NBA. I can't control that. It's just who I am.
Yeah.
As born, as I was born, right? And so, but we want to these are games here. We want to create an experience to where players can feel like, um, or we want to create a system where they can feel like they have a great experience, no matter what their sort of skill is, right? And I think you see this situation a lot of times in competitive multiplayer games, where beginning of the season there's a huge concurrency of players, and over time it starts to dwindle. And why does it dwindle? Because kind of the lower ranked players go, I guess this is how high I can go. They're not going to keep staying around and not progressing just so that it keeps the concurrency high for the high ranked player, right?
Yeah.
And so what do you do about that?
Yeah.
So anyways, this is really complicated. There's a lot of different things to think about here, but the crux of it is, should WoW have a solo queue rated system? My view is just that I'm thinking about a long-term, deep philosophical view. I'm sort of against it, but will it happen? Could happen. No one ever on the team ever said, "Hey, I want to put this ready. It's all ready to go, Chris. Just prove it." And I never,
I'm not saying that's what I'm saying,
right?
Yeah.
And so it's still an active discussion on the team. It's something they could do. Maybe it would surprise me and work out perfectly. I don't know, but I think one area that they could improve upon is the group finder experience.
Sure,
I think, like I said, trying to find players like me is always challenging. What I usually do is I create a throwaway community in the game, and then anybody I play RBGs with, I tell them to join it, and want to make a group, I just go down that list and whisper them and say, "Hey, I'm making a group," or whatever, right? And so those people may not be actively looking through Group Finder for an RBG at that point, but they may be doing something else, but be willing to join, right?
Yeah.
And so the game should think about having, what's funny is the first looking for group system WoW had, it was a checkbox. It was a checkbox saying, "Hey, are you looking for a group right now? Or are you just like doing your own thing?" And if you had that checked, you would go into the list of things where people would, you'd be on a list of people who are willing to join a group.
Yeah.
And so I think the game needs something like that. It
Yeah.
needs some way to opt in. Like, I'd be willing to do an RBG if someone whispers me and has a group going.
You're right.
But I'm not actively in the
sitting in this thing
looking,
where you
right?
can't do anything else as well, right? You can't do other content while you're in this group finder, right? You can't actually. When you're in that group finder, you're not able to even do other things, right? You can't queue.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
my whole thing is, we'll end it here. I'm not saying solo queue is the goal of it. The reason why I advocate for so much is I just don't like this. I don't like hearing players say I can't find a group. It's just the worst feeling for me. I can't say. I want the game to grow. I want players to feel like they can participate in all forms of content, and then maybe they don't really like it. But I never want the experience to be, I just could never do it. That's what bothers me the most, and that's what I hear. So that's the solution that comes to my mind. But all for making the LFG system just way better. You shouldn't sit there for hours waiting for a group. The game, you should be able to do everything you want in the game, and then maybe it parries it for you and say, "Hey, would you like to play with these players? These people matched up with you. Would you like to play with these players?" And then you could decide yes or no, and that would be infinitely better than just simply sitting in this little pool where you have to do all of the work. Where you're waiting and then going to this website, check PvP. It's a website people use. You check all their achievements. Okay, this guy's legit. It just seems archaic.
No, I mean, I totally agree. And especially when RBGs Arena, it happens Arena too, like towards the end of the season or whenever it is where it gets harder to find people. It does feel like I'm in the UI trying to find someone for a long time, and that experience does suck. And so I mean, I'm super sympathetic to. I know completely why players want solo queue rated, and maybe if I thought about it deeper, maybe I could see a reason, or I could be convinced that that's definitely the way to go. It just there are a lot of anxieties, and
you're worried about what it could lead to.
Yeah, exactly. And so and just I'm not saying they won't do it or they will or whatever it is. And and that has no value or anything like that. It's just there's sacrifices that are made when you add a system like that, you know. And I think WoW Arena is actually one of the best things about it has been its sort of story of teams who found each other and really matched and created a pro team. And you know, that sort of story may not have happened if it was just you never had to like get on voice with each other and really suss each other out and see if you match and things like that. And so
positives to both.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. I asked you so much. I kept you really long. The thing was I had this list, like I'm going to try my best to not. That was long. So I'll have timestamps below for people that want to skip around. Thank you, Chris, for sitting through all of that. If anything ever felt like it was me directing towards you, I hope it didn't come off that way. I didn't.
Oh, no. It's totally fine.
I don't want you to feel like you're responsible for any of the things that maybe we talked about. And I want people to know that as well. I just wanted to do this to give people some insight into why things are that they are, if you could answer those. Anything, I'll have like anything that you want to kind of shout out. I know you don't stream or anything, but maybe anything that you want people to know about you, or any information or where they could find you, or what you want people to know.
Yeah, I mean, I've only done one YouTube video, and that was just a video explaining why I left Blizzard. I do have some plans of doing more videos. I'm still thinking about what those videos would talk about, and whatnot. So yeah, just go ahead and give me a follow on YouTube. Just Google Chris Kaleki YouTube. You should find it.
We'll have it underneath your webcam. So his YouTube channel will be there that you guys can subscribe to, and he'll probably have some interesting content there. I know he wants to do that. And yeah, thanks so much for doing all this. Something else you want to say?
Oh, no, okay. That's it. Maybe just follow me on Twitter too. Sometimes
Twitter,
funny memes and things on there. And I'm still haven't figured out exactly what I'm going to do next, but I have a lot of interesting possibilities. And you know, all my passions have to do about you know, virtual worlds and PvP and things like that. And so I might have something interesting to share soon. So
cool.
Yeah,
I'll be waiting for it. Again, guys, thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. Thank you again, Chris, and I'll see you all in the next one.